That's true.
There's
a lot to lose too. There's a lot.
No, wait, one more minute, Ross, so you're not interrupted.
Chainsaw. Yes.
All right, I got that. You're losing your unlimited table.
Verizon's killing it.
Says who? Says not your
Says
grandfather. Article online.
No,
Reporting
that's
on
right there.
Verizon
It's
killing
in the corner.
their unlimited.
Yeah,
table.
what's up?
Is it
Right.
seen that?
That's probably bullshit.
It was seen.
Yeah, they were very clear about that, that if you currently have been your grandfathered in, they can't take that away.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they get
Do
to
you call it
cancel.
D20?
Now, if you ever
It's not- that's
try and
not-
switch or change your
It's a
plans,
neat thing. Play D&D.
Can't ever
20 side or dice.
That's the thing, yeah, just always.
Oh,
Get phone service
my.
before people
Okay,
like-
let's
well, that
see.
goes a little
What do I
low with
do?
their tethering service too, because their tethering service capped at 2 gig,
Okay.
unless your grandfather just
Oh,
goes
okay.
and then
Are we
you're
okay
only
to
tethering.
close in?
So the key thing is just to
Okay.
never change your phone.
Hello, welcome back, class. I missed you on Tuesday. Ross Przybylski is one of our former alum, and I can't remember what year you graduated. 2005, okay. And he is currently working at Reflection Software as the Director of Flash Development, and he has also started his own business, D20 Studios, where he develops games for mostly mobile devices, right?
Mobile and browser.
Mobile and browser, okay. This is our capstone class, Ross. These are our current seniors who will be graduating in June, we think. And no, it was a great class, so I'm just going to go ahead and let Ross start. Thanks for
Thank you
coming.
very much. Appreciate it. It's great to see everyone here. Had a great opportunity. I'm glad to be here to talk to you guys today. And so let's just start off with a little bit of introduction about myself. So as Carolyn mentioned, I am the Director of Flash Development for Reflection Software. And my role here is essentially to lead our production team in development of interactive e-learning courses. I also am their lead engineer when it comes to things like tool sets that we use to build and develop these interactive programs and simulations. I'm also the manager of D20 Studios, which is a company I started in January 2009. And this is what I use to operate and run the business of creating my mobile games and browser-based games. And recently I became what's called a game developer influencer with Adobe. This is a new program initiative they have designed to, essentially it's a community leadership position, designed to help educate and talk about game design and what it takes to get involved in the industry, which is very much in line with why I'm here to talk to you today. My contact information here, if you're interested in reaching out or have questions afterward, at Ross D20 Studios, and email me. So my goals for today are twofold. One, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a background story and tell you about how I got started with game development and creating this product. And I'm also going to explain a little bit about the steps involved in actually creating the business entity and what's kind of what that looks like. So this all started with a dream, and that dream was to become a game designer. And I know this doesn't look like a computer game because my original goal was actually in board games. I'm a big fan of tabletop, turn-based strategy. You ever heard of a game called Warhammer? These little tiny miniatures with these mock battlefields, and you play with hundreds of these figurines and shuffle around the board like an old-time army general with a stick. So my goal here was to take and combine aspects of different games I enjoyed, Dungeons & Dragons, Magic the Gathering, and combine them all together into one game that kind of was quick and accessible and easy to play. And it really started off as a hobby. This was something that when my friends came over, we have so much time to do gaming, and a lot of the games that we used to play way back when we had all the time in the world have these rule books that are in excess of 80 pages, and we have long, heated debates about the discrepancies of the rules. And so this was a way to kind of allow us to get a quick gaming fix in a short period of time without having to worry about the constraints of these rule books. And so, like I said, this originally just was something I do for fun. My friends come over, we play it. And quickly, though, I became really obsessed with that. This is kind of cool. I wanted to actually make products and cards, so I'd actually start printing cards, as you see here, and designing the artwork for it. And then we actually did a lot of playtesting of the game, and it changed quite a bit. It originally was more like a, go through the maze together as a team and kill monsters, and we discovered it was much more fun to just kill each other. And so the game kind of evolved into this, player versus player thing, where you have, 4 people gathered around, and each player is commanding their own team of characters and attempting to work their way through the gladiator arena here and slay their friends. So, at a certain point I said, this is pretty cool. I think this could actually, sell, because we were having so much fun with it. It was so different than things we were playing before. So I started taking it to various hobby stores and saying, hey, I've got this new design. Could I take some time to, maybe, demo at the store, have some people come and play it? Surprisingly, they were excited about this idea. There was many local areas I went to that were, really happy to have me there, and we had people play it, get feedback, and we kind of rework the design from there. And then eventually I took it to a company in Aurora, actually, called Retmeyer Inc. to have it reviewed. They're a toy board game company that looks at different products and evaluates them for market feasibility. And the results I got back were very positive. They were really impressed with the prototype. Where they said I needed room to improve was in the actual product itself. I mean, obviously I didn't come up with this really cool 3D dungeon here or these miniatures. A lot of these components are obviously borrowed from other games. And it was more or less a reimagining of the rules and mechanics that I was developing. Which from a marketing standpoint is, it's good for gameplay, but it's not good for marketing, because publishers of games like this are looking for something unique product-wise that can allow you to stand out from the market. And so, much to my dismay, I'm like, I was all excited with the positive feedback. It was something that just wasn't going to work in that realm. And they talked about things like self-publication, and when you start looking at the numbers of what it takes to manufacture something like this, coming from an individual person, it's not worth the financial risk. Board games are a very, very niche market, and you have to have a lot of experience in the industry and a lot of know-how to distribute and things like that. So a friend of mine suggested, you've been developing with Flash for some time now. Why not take and convert this game of yours into an online experience? And my feelings were initially like, no, there's no way that's going to happen. You'd have to have multiplayer. You'd have to have all these ways to connect to people and do it, because it just wouldn't be a single-player experience. And but he kind of kept pushing me, just saying like, oh yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, and if you did this, this, and this, and finally I'm just like, you know what? Let's toy with the idea. And so I took and started creating this basic prototype engine, and essentially all it was a 2D grid that would allow you to shuffle around some red circles on a map. And I think I forgot the demo for that today, but it it was a cool landmark, because it allowed me to see this is something I actually could do. This was just making this engine was exciting. It was like the first step, and so I started looking at other products and resources, such as Smart Fox server, which I learned how to do the multiplayer connectivity with, and just started refining this thing using Flash, and eventually created this whole browser experience. And so the result of all that work, as you can see here today, is a game that not only runs on your web browser, but also on any mobile device you could think of, really. I mean, you got a dual screen tablet here, an iPad, mobile phone, and it was all possible by utilizing these really cool tool sets like Flash that allow me to do this cross-platform multi-development process here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and show you just a quick demo to kind of give you a feel for what the game looks like. So this is the game's website. This was another one of the fun business challenges. I've done website work before, but nothing as robust as making a community-oriented site. One of the cool things about this site is it actually has a user forums that ties into the actual game's database. So when you go to create your account to be a player online, the game will actually register you as part of the website as well. And all of that's managed together with one database. So right from the website, you can come in here and play this, and you can log in to multiplayer. And so one of the cool things is that, as I was saying, you can actually play this. This is an iPad type to myself here. Hi, Ross. And there it is on there. And then we can actually go ahead and create a game here that we can both play together. And now on my iPad, I can do this. So this is kind of like your game option screen. If anyone's familiar with like StarCraft or those kind of very popular lobby-based games, this is where you're gathering places. You're going to be picking your characters and deciding who your team will be and stuff like that. And then just fire this up. And so now we are pitted in battle against each other here. And looks like it's my turn down here, so I can actually go ahead and shuffle my characters around the board and send them out to defeat my enemies. So very similar to what you saw on the actual board game prototype here. You've seen the recreated the walls, the grid, these are the figurines, and then here at the bottom are my cards, which allow you to use different cool abilities. And so that's kind of like I was saying, the blend of all these different types of games combined together. And we can go out there and send our minions out and then say end my turn. And now down here, these guys can go ahead and start shuffling out their people. And maybe I want to be crazy and summon some skeletons. So there's some minions to do my bidding and send out to attack the evil guy over here. Bam, didn't get anything. Now, normally I have this option here to actually show the dice rolls. So a lot of the actual board game feel is captured. There would be these animations that show the d20s slugging on there. I think by default we turn it off to kind of speed up the gameplay here, but you can certainly customize those kinds of settings. So that's what the game looks like. It also runs equally well if you have a smaller device. One of the cool things about it is it's multi-screen compatible, so it'll actually condense down to a phone level, and you can use the pinch zoom to expand and shrink the map and kind of shuffle around and move things around.
Ross, before you go on, who did all the design work for you?
It was I work with a team of freelancers actually. So one of the steps that I'll talk about in the business startup is there's obviously a lot of work you can do yourself, but there's just certain things that even if you're like the guru of everything, are going to be a challenge to try and doing all these different things. So like animations, the unit models here, illustrations like that, the artists handle that. They also did this the tile set and things like that. I did do a lot of the design of like the UI, like laying out the interface. I did all the vector artwork for buttons and the icons and the spells. So there's a few things I was able to handle, having some experience in design and graphics. But these character illustrations are where the artist really comes in to bring those guys to life. Anybody else have any questions about the game before we carry on? Okay. So I'll go ahead and close this down. All right. So, what were the results of this of doing this? Well, several things. First, having been in business now since July 2009, we've amassed a community of nearly 10,000 registered players. When the mobile game was released, it received several awards. It was a technical excellence winner, 2010 Indie Pub Mobile Contest. It was also a finalist in the 2012 Independent Propeller Competition for Best Mobile Game. The first week it was launched on the Apple iTunes Store, Apple actually featured the game as a new and noteworthy, so that drew a lot of attention from people, obviously. And it's also featured on Adobe's gaming microsite, and there'll be some publications coming out later this month that kind of talk about the post-mortem process and the success story of how this all kind of came together and really drew this great response from the community. So the motto I kind of work by is that if you have something like this that you look at from a finished perspective and say, this is just way too daunting to ever think that I could do something like this. And it was certainly the perspective I had at the beginning, as I was saying. I mean, board games are somewhat easy because you can understand, oh, it's physical, you just move things around. But then the thought of actually coding, representing that stuff in terms of data, and doing the connectivity, the multiplayer, the database. I mean, so many different tasks, the monetization with the PayPal, and all these different things, you look at those and just go, that's too much for me to do. I can't do that. But the reality I find is that by kind of taking things one step at a time, you can surprise yourself and accomplish things that you wouldn't even think were possible. And I owe a lot to my friend for giving that kind of nudge with the Flash game, because if I hadn't taken that first step to make that simple based grid engine like I was talking about, I never would have got to the point where I could create something like this. It all seems like a lot of cool stuff, but it was really just one small bit of work at a time. Figure out one problem and then move on to the next. So that's kind of the advice I would give for anyone looking to approach this kind of project. Is just don't sell yourself short, because there's a lot that you'd be surprised yourself with if you just take that first step into creating something. So what makes the experience of creating this business unique for me? Many people start off the very formal way. They draft a business proposal, they have a plan for how they're going to monetize, they have the resources in check, they have it all figured out, and then they go and draft their articles of incorporation and they're ready to roll, right? I was not that way. This, as I mentioned earlier, was a hobby for me. This was something I did because I liked it, enjoyed it. It wasn't about getting paid or making millions of dollars on a gaming product. It was about making a game that I myself enjoy playing with my friends. And like I said, it was a kind of a slow transition where, having invested so much time in this and seeing the response I got from people and how they really lit up when they played this, was this could do, I could be doing this. This could be something I could be making and selling and getting some money for it, so that I could continue taking it to the next level, really. So for me, it was a transition of this kind of hobbyist to fumbling at starting this business, so to speak, and now it's become kind of a career. It's not just about creating the game anymore. It's so much more than that. It's about all this technical stuff that I've learned in the process, and these opportunities like here to come and talk to you guys about how this worked for me, and what you can do with these kind of technologies. So let's talk about the steps of starting the actual business now. So the very first step, even for me with my kind of fumbling this, is that you want to do some research. Getting into a business is going to require a lot of commitments, both in terms of time and in terms of money and investments, and also all kinds of legal matters, particularly if you're going to be working with somebody other than yourself. So it's very important that you do the work of researching the different types of business entities you can form. Very commonly, there's associated with maybe 4 different types. There's all kinds of, obviously, subtypes of all these, but you have what's called a sole proprietorship, which is essentially just operating under your own name as a business, and in this case, you can deduct business expenses on your income tax. That's really the main advantage of doing this. There's also a partnership, which is very similar to that, except you're shaking hands with your friend or your business partner and saying, let's do this together, let's go in this venture together, and we'll both handle the responsibilities. In both these cases, the real issue becomes a matter of what's called liability. And in either of these cases, whether you go sole proprietorship or partnership, one of the big drawbacks to these, even though they're very easy to set up and you can not a lot of work on the accounting side, is that your personal assets are not protected when you form a sole proprietorship. They're tied. Your business and your personal income are all tied together. So if something happens on the business side, people come after you on your personal side. So that's why you would look into forming a corporation. And there's a couple different kinds. There's the C Corp or the S Corp, more commonly for startups. The main difference between those two is just in terms of the number of shareholders, and you file your taxes a little bit differently. And an LLC is kind of a more newer business entity. And with this, it has some kind of unique combinations of features of working like a partnership, but also the corporation. Your assets are protected. There's some cool things you can do in terms of how you can branch off the business and separate different projects operating out of that business, so that different entities within the business, particularly creative projects, are protected from one another. The next step, very important, is to find yourself an accountant. And one of the first things to discuss with your accountant is your preferred business operating method. So once you've done your initial research onto what you think might be a good business entity to create, you're going to go to your accountant. And the reason is the accountant's going to be able to tell you based upon your income, your business plans, your projections, what structure would be most beneficial for you from a tax perspective. And that's very important because you want to ensure that you're maximizing the potential gains of your business, and the accountant's going to know what rules and what loopholes and what laws are out there that are going to affect how your business operates. So having talked to my accountant, it came down to either an LLC or an S corp was looking pretty much the same in terms of numbers. So what helped me make my decision of choosing an LLC? For one, paperwork is very simple, and it's one of those things where my focus was going to be upon acting as the primary developer. I didn't want to tie myself down with a lot of business-related responsibilities. So any place I could try to minimize that kind of work was a good thing. And so with the LLC, it was a matter of simply having my lawyer act as my registered agent, and so I pay an annual fee to him to basically file the paperwork with the government, and they submit a form, and they send back to me the thing to sign, and I send the government a check for the registration or the renewal fee, and my business stays running and operational. I'm happy. It takes me about 5 minutes of work, and somehow it all gets done on the back end. The other reason is the expandability I was talking about. One of the great things about the LLC is that when you have different types of creative projects, and particularly games, because I thought to myself, right now I'm working on this as a sole person, but what if I in the future want to collaborate with some other people and maybe start a new project together? I want to make sure that Hero Mages is protected and not susceptible to any kind of legal dispute that may occur with other working parties. So that was why I chose LLC to continue to keep it running, because it's got that extra level of expandability to it. Step 3, lawyer. Get yourself a lawyer. Go and talk to them and get yourself set up. Now, one of the top questions people have when it comes to these kind of things, particularly for indie games, is when do you actually need to have a lawyer? There's a lot of websites out there now that make it very easy to start a business. LegalZoom, for example, is very popular for this thing. Go on there, you do some, type in your business name, you click on some buttons, and all of a sudden they send you a certificate and say, your business is created. Here's your government fee, and you're good to go. And certainly that is an option. It's a very much more affordable option, especially for newer startups. But I like to answer this question of, when it comes to legal matters, do you want to trust a website to be your front man? So the answer to the question is, when you have something to lose, that's when you get a lawyer. If you're just starting off and you're right out of college, you don't have to worry about any big financial things, you don't have any assets that you own, by all means, go with LegalZoom, and if you come into trouble, what's the worst they're going to take from you? The $100 in your savings account? All right, I'll take that. But in my case, I have a house, I have a family, I have a child, so that was not a safe option I was willing to gamble on, and that's why I go to a lawyer. Legal fees will cost you quite a bit, but it's an investment that is very key that you want to look into, because they're going to be able to tell you specific things. They're going to help out with the creation of your articles of incorporation, or if you're an LLC, your operating agreement. So the lawyer actually did all the drafting work for these things. I essentially gave him, here's what my business does, here's what here's my role is going to be, and then he would draft out the actual document and have it all certified and file it as well, so that should anything happen to me, somebody sues me because they played the game so many hours that they're not getting their homework done or something, I can just relax, and they're going to have to go through my lawyer to get to them first. That's the way I like it.
A lot of times, Russ, those two people can be the same, the lawyer and the accountant. There are individuals that actually...
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, they can be, I wouldn't do.
Well, there's actually some very good that are both.
Yeah, we've run into that in the corporations I'm involved with, and they're at some point ends up some sort of conflict of interest, where our accountant will want one thing, the lawyer will want something else. And, it's kind of nice to have the two different voices. Sometimes your accountant makes bad decisions, and we've had that happen too.
I have not personally come across that. When I went to meet with a lawyer, he actually recommended the accountant. I actually started with the lawyer, I did it backwards, but he told me, Ross, your most important man is not me, is your accountant. That's the guy who's going to be doing the bulk of your work. He's your guy to help manage your money. That's the guy you want to invest your buck into. He's like, I'm the guy that's going to handle things when you get into trouble, but for your day-to-day operations, your accountant is your most important person. So, interesting. All right, next up, you're going to register for something called your EIN, or your tax identification number. This is what makes you a legitimate business entity and allows you to operate and have your bank account and do transactions and things like that. It's also what gets registered for your taxing and accounting purposes. In most cases, your accountant will be responsible for setting this up for you. You can do it yourself by submitting some paperwork to the government. In my case, I did it with my accountant, and they got this all taken care of for me. After a couple of weeks, I get a little piece of paper in the mail that says, here's your number, and now I can do all kind of fun things like step 5, start my bank account. So now you can actually go to the bank and say, all right, I've got all my paperwork here. Here's my articles of incorporation from the lawyer. Here is my EIN number from the accountant. Make me a company. And within a few more days, you will have a nice set of business checks in the mail, and if you so choose, your business credit card and those kind of things. So you can begin spending money and getting yourself off the ground. So that's what the steps look like in terms of the actual creation and the mechanics of it. Certainly to me, starting off with this, it seemed overwhelming. How to get through all this stuff, what are all the things I have to do, how do you figure this out? It's really not that hard. Once you go and actually speak with your lawyer, meet your accountant, they really do a lot to help walk you through the process and get you set up. All right, so next big one, funding. Now, this should actually probably be in step 1 with your research, because one of the things that's going to be very important moving forward with your business, especially if you intend to do this as something that's your sole means of income, is that you want to have a good plan set up for how you're going to actually generate revenue, make money, and also how you're going to take and gather that investment. In my case, it was fairly simple. This was not a day job. This was my side job. I have obviously a full-time position already working. So this was something that, to me, if I failed at it, it wasn't going to be a large risk. I wasn't going to invest too much or be outside my bounds. So I personally funded all the assets for things like artwork, software costs, licensing, plus all the fees involved in actually setting the business. For you guys, there's several different options you can go into it. Particularly with games, one of the most popular ones out there right now is called Kickstarter. Now, what's great about this is you essentially, once you have your business plan in place and you have a good concept of what you're going to be developing, you put it up on this website, and then people will make bids on it for you. And it's kind of an interesting form of investment, because rather than getting returns on the sales, what they're getting is essentially extra features in the game. It's almost like a pre-order, like, oh, I really want Diablo 3, so I'm going to go ahead and pre-order it so I get my special in-game item from GameStop. It's kind of what the Kickstarter is like, but it's a little bit more extreme, that they have different brackets. You can pre-order for the, maybe the basic cost of the game for $20, or you can pre-order for like $1,000 and make yourself like the elite backer, and maybe get a character in the game made after you. And so that's kind of what draws people to these things. Some important things to think about with Kickstarter. This is just a look at one particular game that was, this was a very popular topic on Game Sutra, called Star Command. And essentially what this game was about, they were making what looked like a Star Trek role-playing reenactment game for tablets. Really cool product, actually. And they had a Kickstarter goal of $20,000 to do their funding. And they actually received quite a bit more than that, with $36,000. And what's interesting, though, is the breakdown of how that money was actually spent when it was received. And this is something that has been widely talked about and discussed. First off, they had some no-show backers, and this would be people that pledged amounts, but then when the project ended, did not go through on their commitment to paying. Amazon is going to take their chunk of the fees out from Kickstarter. That's how they make their money on the Kickstarter. Prizes are those things I was talking about, where when the incentive to back these projects is these special rewards. In their case, they were offering T-shirts, posters, physical products. And this is probably the biggest thing to learn from this, is that when considering these kind of projects, really make sure you look into the cost of what it's going to take to ship out those T-shirts, because maybe the manufacturing isn't that expensive, but they were shipping worldwide from Australia. The shipping cost of a T-shirt adds up pretty quick. So a lot of the money that they generated was instantly took out just for that. They invested quite a bit in music, which was an important part of the game. Legal and starter fees, $4,000. Now, this is quite a bit higher than what I paid. My total legal costs for the startup were around $1,500 for the legal services, and this involves some contract setups as well. Additionally, you have to look at your government fees, because that's separate from the legal fees. And then it's about $300 to do the LLC registration. So in their case, they have a team. There's a lot more intellectual property and roles defined, so I actually think that this number, to me, looks pretty reasonable considering the cost of hourly rates of lawyers. Poster art, again, this is another physical product that they were creating for trade shows and demos. Their equipment. PAX East was a promotional trade show conference held annually that they were demoing the game at to get some attention for it. And so after all of that, their salary and cost of return from this asking investment was only $6,000 between the entire team. And it actually sounds like, if you read further into the story, they've invested over $50,000 of their own personal funds to really keep making this game, because the budget for what it took to create this game was far more than they had initially anticipated. So one of the comments that comes back from Kickstarter is, especially with new developers that are inexperienced and don't realize the cost involved in making these games, is that people should be wary about throwing their money down, because the obvious fear of backing a project like this that does not have the funds needed to complete the project is, what if the project never is completed? But it looks like in this case these guys are pretty dedicated to following through with that. But it's obviously, it would have been a huge benefit to say, let's put our asking cost at 50 or 60 or whatever it would take to really cover this, and then still allow them time to actually create it. So just something to think about getting into this if you use a method like this. Always try to do a lot of research to plan out costs and be realistic with your estimates. So now we're talking about some of the costs starting my business, and I feel it is a good thing to share just some real numbers, so that you kind of have a starting point when you might look into something like this. What does it actually cost? And so things like software, licenses, things like my servers, my multi-user servers licenses, my Adobe software. You might, in my case, I'm looking at around $2,500 for all the different software, licensing, developer fees, all the costs associated with developing in the iTunes Store, Android Market, Amazon, etc. I said my initial legal fees for starting the business were $1,500. This included the drafting of the articles, or the operating agreement, and also it included some drafting of contracts that I used for my independent artists and things like that, to protect the intellectual property that they were creating for me. EIN accounting setup, I paid $100 to have the accountant handle that and take care of those. There's also government fees associated with it, so I think that actually might be tied to that as well. Government fees, the LLC registration in Illinois costs $300. I'm sure that fee has changed since then. It also, interestingly enough, has an annual recurring fee of about $250 a year, so you're also paying every year to keep the name in the database, I guess. Artwork and media for Here Mages, this involved those animations and illustrations that you saw, the sound effects and all those things cost about $6,000 to get all those. The primary cost was in the illustrations of those unit models you saw. I mean, I think this was a fantastic deal, considering all the work that went into creating those things. The best way to start with your artwork cost is to bid. you just, you're the guy, you're the customer, and you should think the philosophy of, there's a lot of artists out there that want work, and who can give me the best deal and give me the best quality work? And you want to make sure you measure both quality and diligence in addition to cost, because those are both very important things. If somebody gives you a ridiculously low offer and they can't actually do the work for you in the time that you need to complete it with, it doesn't do you any good. So the way I started with this is just posting on different forums. There's a lot of game development forums you can post on the web, and just make a little comment. I'm working on this game. I need artwork of these specifications, and you write a detailed draft of what you're looking for, and then you just provide some content information. Within a day, I had about 10 hits already from all kinds of different studios and art firms. And what was cool about the way I did the selection process was they all have these portfolios, so you kind of go and look at their work, shop around and see what I liked. And the guys that stood out for me were the ones, of course, that said, we're willing to create a free example for you. And I said, heck yeah, all right, I like that. So let's see what we can do. And I gave my needs, and not only were they able to meet my animation needs, but they really kind of exceeded my expectations in terms of actually creating the structure I wanted. I mean, initially I was just hoping to get some illustrations and maybe some sprites, but they actually went ahead and created a structure-based animation that I could code and interchange out the colors of the team with, and they really had a lot of diligence to work with me, and they communicated very well. So these were all very important things for why I chose them. In case you're curious, the studio I work with is called Ore Studios. They're based in Indonesia. And then sound effects, another thing I did for that was research. Custom sound effects would have cost quite a bit, and I felt that there was enough fantasy style sound effects out there from all the popular games, so I figured, let's just see if we can get one of those package deals and shop around to find a deal like that. So I got the sound effects kind of as this big package of different collected stuff that was already used in other games. Not unique to mine, but I felt, this gets the job done, and I can afford that, let's go with those. And then the music was actually great. My brother is a composer, so he just volunteered to serve and stuff. I want to help you out, bro. So if you've got someone like that that's just passionate, is going to create it for you, by all means, take it. If it's free, it's for me. All right, then trade show travel. So initially, getting the ground up, I knew I wanted to have some kind of event that would be the kickoff for the game, and I chose Gen Con in this case because that was the event that really inspired me to start this business in the first place. There was a company there. The very first year I went, when I was still developing this prototype as a hobby, and they had this big old booth set up, and they had this game with all these, and instantly was just drawn to all these little cool miniature looking things, very similar to what you saw in my game. I'm like, this is so cool, you guys are all doing this. And it was really neat to see that in action. I'm like, I could do this stuff. I mean, I'm making this game right now, I'm just one guy, and they've got this whole team of people, and they're doing this same kind of thing. I'm like, I could be this guy here next year. I could be presenting this game. And so that was kind of my inspiration. So I said, I got to be at Gen Con. So, cost of setting up the booth, traveling out there, and hotel, that was all part of the initial budget set up for this.
How'd that show go?
Very well, actually. It went good. It was interesting. I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the marketing side, how that played out in the end. But initially it was great because it helped kind of kickstart initial, little bit of a snowball effect to get the initial user base in. Plus it was a good experience just to be out there and connect with people. It's always good to show a face to your product. So now some of the cost of running the business. So this is after you've got all your initial setup and startup. Oh, another thing I should have mentioned too with the startup piece, any assets you have, one of the other jobs the accountant does is take accountability for all your already owned assets that you want to bring on board to the business. So for example, computers, iPads, any equipment, your office chair. I mean, he'll get down to the detail of the number of markers in your little pencil cup.
Your cell phone.
Exactly, your cell phone. Any of these kind of, any expenses you have that are tied to business, your accountant will do awesome things to figure out what they are and, hey, do you use this for business? Like I said, the pencils in the cup, that was my favorite. Don't you have any office supplies? Do you have a stapler? Do you ever have to, things that you wouldn't even think of as trivial. I mean, I'm like, stapler, who cares about that paper in my printer, or ink for the printer? Any of this stuff, all business expenses. And it's all stuff,
that
stamps.
Was mine, I never thought of.
Yeah, stamps. That's a good
Wow.
one. Yeah.
Stamps.
Yeah, any of these kind of things that we do, shipping little products out or any kind of prototypes are just any of this stuff. So that was an important thing. Obviously, I had a computer already. I've been working with a lot of stuff before, so a lot of my costs would have been different had I been starting from scratch with none of this. I mean, I would have certainly put on there cost of getting the iPad, or cost of getting the mobile phone, or these kind of things. So now, actual terms of running the business. So I kind of just broken out into 3 bucket categories to kind of generalize a little bit what it looks like. So technology fees boils down to things like internet, phone and data plan, things that are used on a day-to-day basis. These are also like your web hosting fees, server licenses, reoccurring things like your developer licenses and those kind of things. Professional fees would be your fees to the accountant, your fees to the lawyer every year to act as your agent, and your cost for doing your government registrations as well. Government related costs with that. And then, again, you always want to budget in some time. And I mean, just personally, I've done some kind of trade show or event or marketing thing every year. The last couple of years I've gone down to San Francisco to the Moki Flash Game Summit to do networking, show off the game, meet other developers, all things that are important to the survivability and long-term success of the business. So total cost here, we have about just $3,500, $4,000 or so annual cost of running this business. So not a whole lot in terms of like a business sense. It's a lot personal, I suppose, but something that somebody working a full-time job already can pretty easily maintain. Again, this was not initially designed to be let's quit my job and do this. It was meant to be this is what I do on the side to further my career. Okay, so the next big topic we want to talk about is marketing. And this is one of those interesting things where when you get started, especially if you're a developer, and I assume that the majority of you here are CS students, and you're all CS students, okay. And so you're all developers or programmers in some sense, right? You all do coding. And looking at this, hearing this presentation today, I would assume you would be playing the role of, I've got this great idea for a piece of software, and I want to create this. Is that generally true? You guys are all kind of like the actual developer guys, right? Okay. So I was the same way. I was the guy that was actually going in heads first, coding this stuff. And so what's interesting about that is you don't think about a lot of these other things you have to do. There's a lot of hats you have to wear besides just your developer, coder, hat. And one of those, like I said, was the business startup, and that's why it's great when you have people like your lawyer and your accountant to do those roles for you. But the one thing they can't do for you is tell you how to actually make your money and how you're going to get your product out there. And one of the hard truths you will learn is that it doesn't matter how awesome your idea is or how good your product is if nobody hears about it or nobody knows how to access it or nobody finds it or discovers it. Because at the end of the day, as cool as it is, if only 5 people are playing it, it's not going to be making any money, and your business is not going to do so well. So marketing is something that you should really put a lot of thought into as early as possible. And again, this was one of the mistakes I made that I think I've learned a lot from, and going to this on my next project will certainly be a top priority. I mean, one of the mistakes I made was just going gung-ho to development and never taking the opportunity to really promote the game. Something as simple as a press release that says, we've got this awesome new game coming out, who would be interested in it? Get yourself a forum set up, like a website early, and you can have people go on there, maybe see like a simple demo or a concept art or a description at the very least of what your game's about, and say, hey, this game's coming out, who would be interested in beta testing it? Who would be interested in signing up for this? Who would like this? And get that exposure early on so that as your game progresses, you've got this snowball of followers that are ready to jump on in right when you start that day one. You don't want a dead launch day when you fire up the server for the first time. So that's one big thing. I did get this on later in the phase, so that was one thing I was able to recover from a little bit. Maybe a month or so, or some weeks before the actual launch, I started going to forums, telling people about it. I had the beta site set up with a little cool promo where you could sign up to play the beta. And I had a good maybe 100 or so people, which for my eyes was a success having never done this. I mean, certainly you could do much better than 100, but I mean, for me that was great. And then the first show game we had, between 50 and 100 people actually show up to play the game. And so that was the very nervous moment of, okay, we're launching it at this date and time, you had all your announcements up there, and you're just praying to God that somebody comes in there. And it was like that magic moment when you start seeing the little chimes of the people entering the chat log. It's like, yes, people did hear about it. I got the message through, so very important. Another reason, or another thing Mark might talk about, which is why I've got the little Google Droid robot here up, is be very careful, particularly in the mobile market space, about how you brand, sell, and price your product. And I'm going to share a little story about my little blunder when it came to the Android marketing side. So initially the game was on browser, and I was, had worked on this Android version, and I had the Android version maybe ready for about a year, and I was just doing the optimizations to the graphics and making it run faster, and adding the tutorial and some other new features I felt were essential to a mobile release. And it was actually during this contest called the Sony Air App Challenge, where I really pushed myself those last 3 months to complete the project and incorporate the necessary multi-screen features for phones and tablets. And during this time, it was all about crunch to get the programming done. And one of the challenges I faced was, well, how am I going to monetize the app version of it? Out of curiosity, I mean, I'm sure we should go back and actually talk about it. The way the browser monetized the game was through the sale of character packs. So it was a free-to-play game, but I sold these character packs that allow you to expand playability. So initially you could jump on for free, totally play the game and enjoy the experience. You don't have to buy anything. You can literally just play for hours on end with just the basic starter packs. And it's actually funny, I have a user on there now that has over a month's worth of hours. Literally, like he spent a month of his life playing Hero Mages, which I think is awesome. But he has not bought a single character pack. So he's been freeloading it for all this time. He's my top player and has not paid me anything. So just a testament to the fact that it is a game you can play without paying anything. But the way that the game, the incentive is that if you like the game and you want to take it to the next level and really try some other strategic options, you can buy these character packs. And I charge $10 for a set of 3 of these characters, and there's currently 2 expansions, and there's also a map editor that's $10 that allows you to save your own custom grid configurations. So that was how the game was making money. It was a very niche product, and at the time, I mean, that was actually even a high price for a Flash game, because people are expecting Flash to be like Congress. You go on there and you play your little bog or whatever it is for free, and you call it a day. And you don't really think of Flash as a premium game when you're paying money to access different features. But I saw this type of channel like, heck, it doesn't matter what you make the game with. If it's as good as any console game and people are willing to spend a month worth of hours playing it, then heck yeah, it's good enough to be sold for money. And so that's why I felt the price point was good. I mean, and it was a niche product too. When you consider your pricing, one of the things you want to think about is, who's your audience? And if it's Angry Birds, casual gameplay, anyone can play it. I mean, they can get away making it free because there's a billion people have downloaded this game now. I mean, even if you're making a cent on ads, you're making tons of money. So they can sell it for that low price. In my case, not so much. I mean, I would have to have a lot of people to make it where I can only sell for $1 because I'm not going to be making any money if only 1,000 people download it. So the $10 price point worked well because, again, it was a niche game. There's not a lot of competition for it. It's fairly unique in terms of what it offers. And you have to be pretty geeky to like that nice combination of cards and miniatures and tabletops. So people that like these kind of games and really can't get anywhere else, they're willing to pay the $10 and say, you know what, I think this is great value. I enjoy playing this, and here's your $10. And I think that's awesome. And now the thing where I'm saying the challenge took place in this marketing for mobile is that mobile customers do not feel that way. Browser customers are a little bit different because it was a free game and they're paying their $10, but $10 on a mobile marketplace for a game is pretty much approaching like ludicrousy. It's like, how can you charge $10? You are insane. And so it was kind of funny. I had a plan in place for how I would handle this. I knew getting into the mobile marketplace that I was never going to be able to sell my expansions for $10 because people are expecting games to be like $1, if anything. Maybe most of them are free. So I just decided, you know what, I'm so focused on programming the game, I don't have time to figure out a full marketing plan. I think I know what I want to do. I mean, I figured maybe I'd make it to where you could play for free, play for free to earn stuff versus having to pay, and then maybe have the option to pay, or something that would allow you to access that content without having to pay $10, essentially. I didn't quite know what it was, so I just said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make the tutorial a little note about it. So when you play the tutorial, it actually has a note that says, yep, the pricing is pretty crazy, but it's going to be changing. So look for that in the future update. And in the meantime, if you want to pay the $10 to help support the development of this game, I would really appreciate it, because then I can make even more cool stuff for you guys, and that would be awesome. So it was kind of an interesting backlash from that. I just figured, you know what? Let the problem handle itself, and we'll see how it goes. And I figure if anything else happens, I can always change the price, right? And the interesting thing that happened was, the way I handled the app was, I sold it for $3 in the App Store, and then I just kind of left the ability to purchase these characters for $10 in the game still. And so a lot of people play the game, download it, it's like, oh, this is great, 5-star feedback. And then, then you start to see these like 1-star reviews, and this developer is completely ripping me off. He's expecting me to pay an additional $20 for a game I just paid $3 for. And $3 is a lot for me, because I don't normally pay $3 for games. And so it was amazing feedback. I'm just like, I'm like, wow, I really thought that my message in the tutorial would have handled that kind of backlash. And I still felt like for $3, the game you're getting is still pretty damn good. I mean, like I said, you have the guy that's playing it for a month without buying anything. So for $3, it felt like, yeah, it's still a good game, right? You can still have those things. And I didn't want to take the characters out, because then you have the people on the web that are playing versus Android, and they can't use them. And anyway, I digress. How do you handle the situation once you're in it is the next thing. And the best advice I have for that, if you do make a mistake and make a marketing blunder such as I have, you respond as any good business person should, with good customer service. You would be surprised how much just a kind email back to somebody who, and the grants you'll get usually for these purposes is, I get 2-page, 3-page emails, like literally going to every detail as to why I'm a horrible person, how I'm this evil corporation scamming them, how I'm robbing them of their hard-earned $3. And you have to take a moment to just pause, because it's like, I see you've got Starbucks on your desk there. What did you pay for your Starbucks today?
$2.
$2. Okay, and it's coffee, and you're gonna drink it what, maybe like a minute worth of time, and that's your $2. Whereas my game, you could play for 3 months of a month of your life and enjoy countless hours of gameplay and fun. And Starbucks somehow is acceptable to people to pay their $2, but a game like this for $3 is somehow approaching insanity. Like, oh my God, you have just robbed me because you took $3 and your game does not include these extra features that I was expecting to have. So having put that aside, and all the hours that I've spent at work making this game aside, and just taking it from a business approach, it's like, you know what, I relate to the customer. You're right. It does seem absurd, because other games are not priced this way. And so oftentimes what I do to respond is literally just speak to the value of it. Here's why it's priced that way. Here's what this game offers you that other games don't. I mean, this isn't like a Zynga game where you download it and play it and you have fun, but then if you actually want to take it to the next level, or talk to the developer, you don't have any access to it. I mean, it's an indie game. You have direct access to me, the developer, and there's not many games out there that allow you to chat on a one-on-one basis with the creator and offer feedback to take it to the next level. And so I'll literally send these emails back, and I'll put a good responsive time in each one. I'll customize them to the responses, and I'll send them a link to my features page and say, here's the list of things that have changed in the game at the request of players. And this is the value of why these things cost $10 right now, because this is what it takes to make these things. I'm committed to delivering you this awesome product and customizing your experience so that you can fully enjoy this game beyond just being a simple throwaway purchase like most games. And what's great about that is that people come back and they go, wow, I never really thought about it that way. They kind of still maybe feel a little bit comfortable with the price, but at the very least they change their tune. They give you some respect and say, you know what, I understand where you're coming from now. And what's really interesting is that many of these players that initially would be so turned off by you having had the opportunity to communicate with you and hear your response will become the exact opposite. Before they were giving me the 1-star, now they're giving me the 5-star, and they're telling all their friends about how awesome and unique this game is, because this guy actually listens to what I say. He actually gives it. He actually cares about what my opinions are on the game, and he wants to really make it better. And so they become your champions, your advocates. So interesting thing there. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about was these trade shows and kind of what my experience has been with that. So for marketing and game purpose, trade shows are very expensive. Like I had my cost there about, if you're going to run a booth particularly, and this was like a discount, like new developer price at Gen Con was about $1,100, and then you have the cost of power hookups if you're going to run demos, and that's another maybe $100 or so. And then obviously your hotel, your travel expenses, your time, all those kind of things have to factor in. So what does return look like on that? Certainly you will get customers to come play the game, and you will get people to sign up for your game, which is awesome. But the interesting thing is that if you look at what you get back in product sales, and like I said, my first year at Gen Con was awesome because people are actually buying it now. They weren't just playing; they were buying the packs, which was cool. But I looked at what my return was, and it doesn't quite equal out because you have to be very careful with how you target it. And I think that in my case, with trying to promote it at this board, and Gen Con's primarily a board game convention, Magic, card games, tabletop, things like that. I figured we're going to be the first e-game that's got this stuff all incorporated. And a lot of people really enjoyed it, but it was not the return level I expected. So moving forward, I started just kind of doing other trade shows, and I would look for ways to do the trade shows for free. I'd work with kind of independent trade shows, and I would say, you know what, I'm not really a vendor per se because I'm not selling things. And most of the trade shows are looking for people that are going to be selling products. That's why I charge you those fees, because you're essentially utilizing that trade show to sell products. And so they're making the returns back on their products in like the first day they're there, and then anything else after this is a profit. Computer games, especially a free computer game, is not the same. I mean, people aren't going to necessarily spend you back what you invested to go to the trade show. Your hope is that you generate enough interest that they go and tell their friends, they tell their friends, and that somewhere along the line somebody's buying it and helping to maintain the structure and the economy of the business. So by looking at it from that perspective, though, I would go to different kinds and say, you know what, it's a little bit different. I'm not selling a product. What can we do in terms of making an arrangement where I'm kind of helping to cooperatively help your event? And so I've done a lot of other events, some of them actually at local colleges. I was at COD's COD-Con, for example, a couple of years ago, and they just have these gaming conventions. And the idea is it's about hosting events to have people just come and play and try out stuff. And I said, I'm just offering entertainment. That's what we're doing. And so that really worked out well. That's a smarter way to approach it. And I actually came back to Gen Con another year, and this time instead of being a vendor in the hall there, I just was an event host. And so I literally just got to set my laptops. There was no cost involved in doing so. But I basically worked and just said, people came by and they had tickets. And they said, I want to play this game. So they would just give me their little tickets, and I would demo the game, give them a play experience, and it was a smarter way to utilize that marketing cost. So really all I was paying for was travel at that point. So that's kind of how that's turned out. The great thing about the app stores is that a large task of advertising and selling your app and promoting it is done for you. And that's why Google and iOS are going to take this large 30% cut out of your revenue. And I know that seems like a lot. I mean, I thought so to myself when I got into it and said, man, I did all the work on this game, making this thing, and they're going to take 30%, they're going to say that their work was worth 30%. All they're doing is just throwing it on their server, and that's it. What are they doing to earn 30% of my hard-earned work? But I'll tell you something. I mean, for that 30%, the return you get back is just immense. I mean, like, my sales were okay as a browser game, but you go onto the App Store, and it was like I was making more money on a $2 or $3 app than I was selling my things for $10 because there was just so much more volume, so much more accessibility. I mean, I didn't have to worry about how people found out about the game. They would just search for turn-based tactical game with cards or with multiplayer. And like I said, there's not many games that have that, so I would be like a top search. And so they'd find it and they'd download it and they'd enjoy it. And I'm like, this is great. And then the iTunes store, even greater. I mean, when the game first came out, it was featured as a new and noteworthy. So the next day, I just kind of, after having launched, I go to look at my numbers, I'm just like, what the heck? And it was like 300 people had downloaded it, and I was like, this is insane. I mean, it was like, it was more people than my entire last month of Android sales. And it was just like really exciting to see that kind of response. So definitely consider targeting mobile moving forward, because it's just so much an easier place, unless you're like kind of an established company and you have a good strategy and you use like a Facebook or a social network and you have a game that's really kind of more of like a viral game that can generate that massive revenue on the web. Mobile is a great marketplace because you can find a niche really easily, and that search functionality on those devices will allow your product to be reached by a lot more people than you ever dream of getting access to on the browser. And the other great thing is because those devices are tied into payment systems already, particularly the iOS, because all you do is just literally click the app and maybe type your password in. You don't have to worry about bringing your credit card out of your wallet, and that's the part where people usually stop when they come to the browser. Come to PayPal, up, I'm going to put my credit card out, and they think about it, and they go, I don't know if I want to spend $10. But if it's just typing your password, well, okay, you know, that's not so bad, you know. So, and that's where that system, another reason that system works. So. Okay, so now we come to the really fun part. This is my son. Here he is rocking out in his I Love Hero Images onesie. And here he is, a few months older, playing Hero Images on the iPad in his stroller.
You sell those onesies?
Yeah, coming soon to the Hero Images store for a little bit. Yes.
That's very funny.
So I have these up here to kind of just talk about one of the other interesting parts about putting up a business, and this is kind of about the personal sacrifices that you will have to make. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize with starting a company, because they're so often glamorized as like the height of achievement. You know, that's the American dream. Start your own company, run your own business. It's like the greatest thing ever, right? Yeah, I'm my own boss. It's so awesome. What people don't realize is that you will work more hours than you have ever worked, and you will be paid less than you have ever been paid for working. So if your motivation is to start a business to get rich quick, or to be your own boss and make all this money and not have to worry about things, think again. Because the reality is that while some rare